Hey guys, do you want to turn your brute force into absolute monster off-road? Do you want a ton more ground clearance? Do you want to be able to fit those 30-inch tires you've been looking at? Well then stay tuned, because today on Rebels Off-Road, we will be installing CFAB's Arch A-Arm lift kit to enable you to do just that. But first, go like and subscribe to stay up to date on all the action. This project should take about 3 hours, and anyone with average mechanical skills in these tools should be able to complete it. Next, it's time to remove the lower A-arm. To do this, we will use a 14mm box wrench and a 14mm socket connected to an impact drive. We need to remove this bolt here, the shock bolt, this bolt here, as well as this one over here. We're going to take our box wrench and we're going to put it on this back side where the nut is, and then we're going to take our impact, make sure it's set to loosen. We need to get this bolt out. Next, we're going to remove the lower shock bolt and the inner A-arm bolt in the same manner. On this one, you're going to want to come up with your box wrench on the back side. There's a little guard that covers it up from the top. And same thing with this one. We want to go ahead and get this box wrench back from under it, and I'm using a ratchet on this one because we can't get our impact in here. Once this final bolt's removed, the arm should just slip right up. Now just repeat what we did on the left side over here on this side. Bang bang, ugga dugga, wrench, 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 ugga dugga, wrench, wrench, ratchet, 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 wrench, 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 wrench. I just wanted to note something. I've already removed my rear sway bar, did it a couple weeks ago. I love it without it, you may not, but I just wanted to show you how to do it. Basically, there's two 12mm bolts that attach the upper bushings to the sway bar right here, and there's two on the other side. The lower link attaches to the A-arm right here. This is the link here. What you want to do is you want to take an Allen key and put it right in there. There's a little Allen key fitting there. And you take a 14mm open-ended wrench, and while you hold the Allen key, you rotate the nut off. It'll come right off. So you want to do that on both sides, and the rear sway bar will come right out. So before we can install these A-arms onto the bike, we need to install these bushings into the A-holes. So I highly suggest that before you shove anything into the hole, that you lube it up nice and get her ready. I'm using a little bit of this green stuff grease, and I'm working it around the rim of the hole. And then on the other side. And now we're going to take one of these bushings, split it apart, insert one side, shove her in, and the other side.
She wasn't ready.
And then we're gonna take this guy, we're gonna also lube him up with grease. Just a little bit does it. And we're gonna slide the shaft into the hole. Now we're gonna repeat for all 4 A-arms in all the holes. Install your new lower A-arms in the reverse order of how you took off your stock ones. I'm just putting the bolts through the hole for now. Now we'll finger tighten the nuts. Now we'll just tighten them down. Repeat for the other side and you're done. Sometimes it takes a little brute force to get this bolt hole lined up, but you'll get it. Reinstall the tires, lower the bike back down, and we're good to go. So whoever put those wheels on, and I have no idea who that could have been, put them on really super tight, probably with an impact wrench, a couple too many ooga doogas, but it was a little bit difficult, but I got it off. So there we go. With the wheel removed, we can now remove the lower ball joint castle nut and separate the lower arm from this castle nut. So first step is to remove this cotter pin here. I'm going to use some needle nose pliers to bend the portion of the cotter pin back straight. And just squeeze it together. And then once you have it squeezed together, relatively straight, you can start pulling on it out this way. Sometimes I find that it's easier to just tap a little bit on this side while you're pulling. But be careful not to bend back that cotter pin like I just did. Don't do that. Once you get it about to this point, you can just pull it free. And now all that's left is this castle. To remove this castle nut, we are going to be using a 17mm socket and ratchet. Keep in mind that sometimes on these ball joints, when you go to remove the castle nut, the ball joint itself will rotate. What I like to do if I don't have an impact wrench is just to wedge a pry bar in between the knuckle and the lower A-arm and put some pressure, some hard pressure on there while backing off the nut. And that usually creates enough friction so that the nut will back off without rotating the ball joint. So now that I've removed the castle nut and the washer, I'm gonna use a pickle fork and put it in between the knuckle and the lower A-arm. And then just using a BFH, gonna hit that pickle fork until the lower A-arm just drops free. So now we are going to move on to the inner A-arm nuts and bolts, just like we did on the rear. And once again, these are gonna be a 14mm nut and bolt. So we're gonna be using our box wrench on the back side again and a ratchet on the front. Now that the A-arm is free, you should be able to just wiggle it loose by pushing this up and prying it out like that. Next up, we're gonna remove the upper shock bolt, which is also a 14 millimeter.
That's shocking.
Now just pull the shock down and out of the way. And repeat the same thing on the other side. Next, what you're going to want to do is install this bracket, and it goes right in front of the old shock mount bracket, and it goes all the way over to the other side. And you're going to line up the second hole up to the original shock bracket, and you're going to take a washer on the bolt, and you're going to feed it up through there just to get it in place enough. So then you're gonna take your little spacer, that's what's gonna sandwich where the old shock goes. What we gotta do now is add this little bracket here, and that's gonna go right in between as well. See if you can see that. So I'm noticing a little bit unwanted gap there, because what you wanna do is you wanna crush this washer down as if it was your original OEM shock, so that bracket squishes this whole entire group together. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna add a couple washers in between there, and then I'll show you how it should look. We've got the bolt, front full-size bracket, original bracket. I have this washer to close up some of the gap, the spacer that was provided with the kit, and then this miniature bracket. And then the nut on the back side. So now we're gonna push this shock back up, and we might have to push down on the A-arm a little bit so that it lines up with the two new holes. We're gonna wanna take our stock bolt and we're gonna push it all the way through. So then it looks something like that. Now we're just gonna tighten up the nuts. So now you can see the final setup with the bracket, the stack up there, with the washer, spacer, and back here you can see the new nut and how we got it on there. So now we're just going to repeat this for the other side. With the rear arms and bracket lift installed, all that's left is to put on the lower front arm. So I'm going to grab one of these and we'll head over. So installing the arched A-arms is the reverse order of uninstalling your stock one. So we're gonna get up under here. So now we have the inner bolt started, and we're gonna go ahead and attach the lower ball joint to the lower A-arm. Now's a good time if you have the capabilities to put a little bit more grease back in your ball joint. We had a little bit of this squirted out, so we're gonna do that. We're not gonna show it. It's a good time to do it now. Line up the ball joint with the lower plate and slide it on. Replace your washer and start your castle nut all the way up as tight as we can. Now grab your 17 millimeter socket and ratchet, and we're gonna tighten this nice and snug. So I don't know if you can see this, but when I'm turning it, the ball joint's actually rotating and we're not tightening this nut. So I'm gonna go get a pry bar and we're gonna try that trick. So what I ended up having to do, the pry bar didn't work. You wasn't able to get enough pressure on it. So what I did was I took a jack and I put it up on the A-arm, and I jacked it up as far as I could without it raising up off the jack stands.
Jacked up and good to go.
And that was able to put enough pressure on it, I think, that I'll be able to turn that nut without it spinning the ball joint. So let's see what we can do. A little issue I've noticed with the fit of this product is when you insert the ball joint all the way down, there's this little bit tapered portion of the ball joint that sticks down below the plate. So when you go to tighten up the nut goes all the way up to the top, but it leaves a little bit of a gap. So what I'm gonna do to fix this is gonna take a large washer and put it up in there. So it'll just thicken that up a little bit. But that is, you know, potentially a problem, and it would lead to having your ball joints very loose, which would lead to premature failure. So just keep an eye on that. If you do get these, make sure that there is no gap between your nut and washer and the bottom of the plate. With the additional washer in place and tightened down, I'm gonna put the cotter pin in. Bend the ends down and the other side up. And make sure you don't forget to tighten the inner bolts on the arm. So I'm gonna do that right now. Tighten them down nice and snug. You are complete with this arm. So now we just need to do the same thing on the other side.